7 common egg mistakes are quietly putting adults over 60 at risk. And the single most dangerous one is hiding inside foods that look completely harmless. Foods you probably eat without a second thought. Foods that feel like comfort, like tradition, like home. If you're like most people, eggs have felt safe your entire life. They are simple. They are cheap. They are familiar. Many people treat them as one of the healthiest things on the breakfast table. And in many ways, they are. After 60, eggs can be a genuinely wonderful food. They deliver high-quality protein that helps protect muscle mass, which becomes harder to hold on to with every passing year. They supply choline, a nutrient your brain leans on for memory and healthy nerve function. They carry lutein and zeaxanthin, compounds connected to protecting eyesight. When it comes to defending the 3 front lines of aging, muscle, brain, and vision, the humble egg punches far above its weight. That is exactly why the conversation you are about to hear matters. When a food feels as familiar, people stop being careful with it. And with eggs, that becomes a real problem. Some mistakes happen in the frying pan. Some happen inside the refrigerator. Some happen at church brunches, holiday tables, potlucks, and family breakfasts. And a few of them are so ordinary, so deeply built into lifelong routines, that people never realize they're taking a risk until they end up with severe stomach illness, dehydration, a dangerous infection, or a setback the body does not shake off the way it used to. That is the part most people miss. At 30, the body can get away with things that become genuinely serious at 70. The same breakfast, the same storage habit, the same recipe. Different body, different outcome. And many of the health problems that frighten people late in life do not begin with a dramatic event. They begin with a quiet habit, a shortcut, a routine, a small kitchen decision that felt too insignificant to matter until it does. So today, let's walk through the 7 most common egg mistakes seniors make, counting backward from number 7 down to the most dangerous mistake of all. Stay with me through the end, because after number 1, there are 3 simple egg safety habits that make breakfast safer, easier, and far less stressful from this day forward. Before we begin, one simple question. How do you usually like your eggs? Scrambled, hard-boiled, poached, over easy? Whatever your answer, hold on to it, because by the time we reach number 2, that answer might not feel as harmless as it does right now. Number 7, throwing away the yolk and keeping only the white. For years, many older adults were taught to fear the yolk, so they cracked the egg, let the yellow center slide into the sink, and keep only the whites, convinced they are making the heart-healthy choice. It sounds sensible. Egg whites are high in protein and low in calories. They contain no cholesterol. If you spend decades hearing that the yolk was the dangerous part, this habit can feel almost responsible. But here's the problem. The yolk is where much of the egg's real nutritional value lives. That golden center is the primary source of choline, the nutrient your brain uses to support memory and nervous system function. It is also where you find lutein and zeaxanthin, the compounds most closely connected to eye health. And as the years stack up, brain function and vision are exactly the systems people work hardest to defend. When seniors toss the yolk every single morning, they may be removing the very nutrients that made eggs worth eating in the first place. A breakfast built only from whites is thinner, less satisfying, and nutritionally smaller than it looks. Now, a careful note. If your own physician has told you to restrict yolks because of a specific medical condition, that advice comes first, always. Doctors' orders outrank any general rule. But for most people, the old blanket fear yolks is no longer the whole story. What matters far more is the overall pattern around the egg. If your eggs sit beside bacon, sausage, buttered toast, and hash browns fried in grease, the yolk is not the biggest problem sitting on that plate. That distinction matters, because many seniors have spent years fearing the wrong part of the meal. And that misplaced fear quietly leads to a less nourishing breakfast, especially when appetite has already shrunk with age. A lot of older adults no longer eat large meals, when breakfast is one of the few reliable sources of high-quality protein and valuable nutrients. Stripping it down unnecessarily works against you. More than once, the person who believes they're being good ends up more tired, less satisfied after breakfast, and reaching for far less beneficial foods just a few hours later. The The better approach for most people over 60 is not to automatically fear the yolk. It is to prepare the whole egg wisely. Pay attention to how it is cooked, what it is cooked in, what it sits beside, and how often the rest of the plate is loaded with salt and saturated fat. If you have been tossing yolks for years without a specific reason, it may be time to re-examine that habit. Not because eggs are magic, because nutrition after 60 should be strategic. And that strategy matters more than you think. Because the next mistake takes a perfectly nourishing egg and turns it into something far heavier than anyone realizes. A breakfast that feels like a reward while quietly working against everything you're trying to protect. And the scary part is, it does not taste dangerous at all. It tastes like the best part of the week. It tastes like the way breakfast was always supposed to be. Here is number 6. Number 6. Turning eggs into a butter, cheese, and processed meat overload. This mistake does not feel dangerous. It feels delicious. It feels like comfort. It tastes like the breakfast people grew up with. Weekend mornings, diner counters, holiday buffets, the table at a relative's house after church. Nobody is ever warned about this breakfast. It is the one everyone smiles at. 2 eggs by themselves are one thing. 2 eggs fried in butter, buried under cheese, served beside sausage or bacon, and followed by salted toast are something completely different. And most people never separate those 2 ideas in their minds. They say, eggs raise my cholesterol. But it is rarely the eggs alone they're talking about. It is the entire package built around them. The butter, the cheese, the processed meat, the extra salt, the added grease. That combination is where many seniors quietly get into trouble, and the trouble arrives in a form most people never recognize. Here is why it matters more now than it did at 40. As the body ages, cardiovascular risk matters more, not less. Blood vessels become less forgiving. Blood pressure becomes harder to control. The heart works harder to move blood through arteries that have lost some of their elasticity. Recovery from a heart event or a stroke becomes more serious and more complicated. And when breakfast routinely delivers a heavy load of saturated fat and sodium, it pushes directly against the goals so many older adults are fighting for every single day, whether they realize it or not. The reason this mistake stays so sneaky is that it happens in small amounts. A little butter in the pan, a little cheese on top, a couple of slices of bacon, a pinch of extra salt. None of those choices looks dramatic in the moment. Everyone tells themselves it is just this once, just a small amount, just a weekend treat. But repeated every morning, these choices accumulate, week after week, month after month. And that cumulative pattern is what does the damage. Risk rarely arrives as a thunderstorm. It arrives as a slow, steady drizzle that nobody bothers to notice until ground is already soaked. Think about the last time you ate breakfast at a diner or a hotel buffet. The eggs arrive already glistening. The home fries are cooked in the same fat as everything else. The bacon is crisp, salty, and practically begging for a second order. Nobody at that table decided to be reckless. The meal simply arrived that way, built by default rather than by choice. And that is precisely how most of the harm gets in, not through dramatic decisions, but through quiet defaults that nobody ever revisits. The breakfast you grew up loving was never a decision. It was a habit, and habits do not require anyone's permission. After 60, the body keeps a running tally of those repetitions, even when the mind stops counting. Sodium pushes blood pressure upward. Saturated fat nudges cholesterol markers in the wrong direction. And the inflammation that follows a heavy, greasy meal is not imaginary. It is measurable, and it is exactly the kind of stress an aging cardiovascular system does not need. Now here is something worth hearing clearly. You do not have to stop eating eggs to make breakfast healthier. Eggs can remain one of the easiest, most reliable proteins in your routine, even after 60. What usually needs to change is the company those eggs keep. That single shift, changing what's around the egg instead of fearing the egg itself, is the difference between a breakfast that helps you and a breakfast that slowly wears you down. Try this instead. Cook them in a non-stick pan with a light amount of olive oil instead of a slab of butter. Use vegetables to build volume and flavor. Spinach, onions, mushrooms, bell peppers, tomatoes. Vegetables do not just add nutrients. They add bulk. So a 2-egg breakfast becomes a 3-egg size breakfast without a single extra egg or a single extra gram of saturated fat. If you love cheese, use a smaller amount of sharper, stronger cheese like aged cheddar or Parmesan, so you still get the taste without burying the whole meal in fat. And if meat belongs on your breakfast plate, think hard about how often processed meats show up there. Sometimes is a very different thing from every morning. A once-a-week treat is not the same as a daily baseline, and the body knows the difference even when the mind does not. One more detail. The sodium in that overloaded plate does not just raise blood pressure. It pulls the body's fluid balance in the wrong direction, leaving you thirsty and bloated by mid-morning. A breakfast built on vegetables and whole eggs naturally carries far less salt, which means steadier blood pressure and a lighter feeling from the very first hour of the day. A breakfast that supports you after 60 should leave you feeling steady, not heavy. It should help you walk more comfortably, breathe more easily, and keep your energy stable for the morning instead of letting it crash by mid-morning. Think about how you feel after that big weekend breakfast. The sluggishness, the heavy chest, the need for a nap by noon. That is not relaxation. That is your body processing a load it would rather not carry. The goal is not punishment. The goal is keeping your heart while keeping food enjoyable. Nobody is asking for bland meals or a life without flavor. The request is smaller than that. Let the egg be the star and stop letting the extras run the show. But here is the uncomfortable question nobody asks. Suppose the eggs are cooked perfectly. Light oil, fresh vegetables, not a gram of excess fat. Could they still be dangerous? Most people would say no without thinking, and they would be wrong. Because the next mistake happens in the very place people assume their eggs are safest, the place that the refrigerator itself seems to have been designed for, the place that looks so correct, so intentional, that almost nobody questions it. And yet, for adults over 60, it is one of the worst choices you can make with a carton of eggs. What you are about to hear contradicts something you have probably done without thinking for decades. And once you hear it, you will never store eggs the same way again. Number 5, storing eggs in the refrigerator door. This one surprises people. You buy a carton of eggs, open a refrigerator, and place it right in the built-in egg holder on the door, because that is where refrigerators seem to invite you to put them. It looks tidy. It looks normal. It looks like exactly what that space was designed for. It is also often one of the worst places to keep eggs. And the refrigerator gave you no warning at all. The manufacturer built a little nest of those eggs, and almost everyone trusts it without a second thought. Why is it so bad? Because the refrigerator door is exposed to repeated temperature swings every time it opens and closes. Think about how many times you open that door in a single day. Every meal, every snack, every glass of milk. Every time anyone in the family reaches for anything at all, the door swings open, warm room air floods in, and the temperature inside the door compartment climbs before slowly falling again over the course of a single day. That cycle repeats dozens of times. The rest of the refrigerator, especially the back of the main shelves, hold a much steadier cold. The door holds a weather report. Ideally, a refrigerator holds eggs at or below 40 degrees Fahrenheit. In the door, that temperature is constantly borrowed and returned, creeping upward with every opening and closing throughout the day. On a main shelf, especially near the back, the mercury barely moves from 1 hour to the next. For eggs, stable cold storage matters enormously. When temperatures rise and fall again and again, egg quality declines faster, and the safety margin gets thinner with every single cycle. If the temperature drifts upward for long enough, condensation can form on the shell, and moisture on a shell is exactly what bacteria love. It is not one big mistake. It is dozens of tiny ones, repeated daily for months. Slow, invisible, and completely accepted because the eggs still look fine sitting in the holder. That may not matter much to a healthy 25-year-old who bounces back easily from a mild stomach bug. It matters far more after 60, when the body is less resilient. Dehydration happens faster. Blood pressure gets harder to stabilize. And a gastrointestinal illness that a younger body might shrug off can spiral into weakness, dizziness, medication problems, even hospitalization in the worst cases. The The same eggs that were perfectly fine on the grocery store shelf can become a much bigger problem by the time they reach your plate, simply because of where you parked them. There's also a subtler trap hiding in the door. When eggs sit there, they're often removed from their original carton. Maybe it is for convenience. Maybe it is because the holder looks like it was made for loose eggs. Either way, it sounds harmless. It is not. The original carton protects eggs in ways people never notice. It reduces moisture loss, so the eggs stay fresher longer. It shields them from absorbing odors from the rest of the refrigerator, odors that can quietly change how eggs taste. And most importantly, it keeps the date and handling information attached to the eggs themselves. Once the carton is gone, people start guessing. How long have these been here? Which dozen is older? Are these still inside a safe window? Was this the carton I bought before the last one? Or after? Those questions matter more than people think, because the answers are exactly the ones that prevent an illness nobody saw coming. And one more rule about handling: do not rinse eggs before you store them. Washing strips away the shelf protective coating, the same invisible layer that keeps bacteria from moving inside. The carton and the steady cold are the protection. Rinsing only removes it, which is the opposite of what most people intend. The safer habit is almost embarrassingly simple. Keep eggs in their original carton. Store them on a shelf in the coldest main part of the refrigerator, never in the door. And refrigerate them promptly the moment they come home from the store, rather than letting them sit on the counter while you unpack the rest of the groceries. For best results, place the carton against the back of a lower or middle shelf, away from the door, where the temperature barely moves. 3 small choices, almost no extra effort, and an entire category of risk quietly disappears. This is one of those habits that feels too simple to matter, and that is exactly what makes it powerful. The safest kitchens are rarely the ones with the fanciest equipment. They are the kitchens with the steadiest routines. The people who never get sick from their own cooking are rarely the most knowledgeable cooks. They are simply the most consistent ones. Same place every time. Same carton every time. Same cold shelf every time. No decisions to make. No guessing. No wondering whether this dozen is the old one or the new one. The routine does the thinking, so the mind does not have to. But even with perfect storage, there's a moment when eggs stop being safe because of how they are kept and start being safe because of how fast you move. Because the next mistake does not happen at the grocery store. It does not happen in the refrigerator. It happens at the exact moment the pan comes off the stove, at the exact moment the platter hits the table, at the exact moment everyone is laughing and talking and reaching for seconds. And it is the mistake that fills emergency rooms every holiday season. The food still looks perfect. It looks exactly the way it did when it was cooked. And that is precisely what makes what happens next so dangerous. Here is number 4. Number 4. Treating time and temperature casually after the eggs are cooked. This is the brunch mistake, the buffet mistake, the holiday mistake, the we will put it back in the fridge later mistake, the I will just leave it out, everyone is still eating mistake. A quiche sits on the counter while people talk. Deviled eggs stay on a platter through a family gathering. An egg casserole remains on the table because everyone assumes someone might want seconds. Egg salad sits out longer than anyone realized. Hard-boiled eggs sit in a bowl while the conversation moves into hour 3. And because the food still looks completely normal, everyone assumes it is fine. That assumption is where the danger begins. Cooked egg dishes should not linger at room temperature. Bacteria multiply quickly in the warm zone between roughly 40 and 140 degrees Fahrenheit, the range that food safety experts call the danger zone. In that zone, a single bacterium can divide into millions within a few hours. It sounds like an exaggeration, but it is arithmetic. 1 becomes 2, 2 becomes 4, 4 becomes 16. Within 3 or 4 hours, you're no longer dealing with a few stray germs. You are dealing with a population large enough to make someone genuinely sick. And here is the uncomfortable truth. You cannot see it. You cannot smell it. You cannot taste it. The food looks exactly like it did when it came off the stove. It may even taste wonderful. That is what makes this mistake so vicious. The evidence arrives only after the damage is done. Dinner was delicious. Nobody noticed a thing. And then Somewhere between midnight and the next morning, the body that ate it starts sending signals that something is very wrong. The official guidance is clear and easy to remember. Cooked egg dishes should not be left out for more than about 2 hours, and only 1 hour if the room is hot, like a backyard gathering in summer. After the meal, leftovers go into the refrigerator promptly. Not when you finish the conversation. Not after you clear the table. Not when everyone finally leaves. Promptly. That clock starts the moment the dish is set out, not the moment the meal ends. And most people do not realize they have been running out the clock while chatting. They think of the 2 hours as starting at the end of the meal. It starts at the beginning. By the time the last guest reaches for seconds, the timer may already be finished. Why does this matter so much more after 60? Because in older adults, a foodborne illness is not always a brief inconvenience. It can mean severe diarrhea, dehydration, weakness, a trip to urgent care, a dangerous disruption in blood sugar, blood pressure, kidney function, or medication timing. And here's the part almost everyone overlooks. People think of food poisoning only in terms of the stomach. But in older adults, the real threat is often what the illness triggers afterward. You become dehydrated. You stop eating. You become shaky. You miss medications. You fall. You become confused. And suddenly, what started as a bad stomach bug becomes a very serious event, the kind that changes lives, not just weekends. That chain reaction is why the 2-hour rule exists in the first place. It was not written to make hosting harder. It was written to prevent that chain from ever starting. This is also why this mistake deserves so much respect. It does not announce itself. It waits. It waits while the temperature creeps up. It waits while the bacteria multiply. It waits until hours later, when everyone has gone home, and the only person still awake is the one whose body is fighting something that should never have been allowed to grow. The fix is not difficult. If egg dishes are being served, keep hot foods properly hot and cold foods properly cold. Do not let cooked egg dishes sit out beyond that 2-hour window or 1 hour in very hot conditions. Refrigerate leftovers before anyone starts the second round, not after. And if you are hosting, serve smaller portions at a time instead of setting the entire dish out and hoping for the best. Refill the platter from the refrigerator instead of leaving everything on the table. That single change can prevent a surprising amount of risk, and it costs nothing. Nobody at the party will even notice. They will simply keep eating food that never spent 3 hours in the danger zone. And when you do reheat leftover egg dishes, heat them until they are steaming hot all the way through, which typically means reaching 165 degrees Fahrenheit, rather than warming them just enough to take the chill off. A lukewarm reheat can turn a cool dish into an even better home for bacteria, because the warm middle becomes a second chance for growth. Now, some people are thinking it. I have done this my whole life, and nothing bad ever happened. That may be true, but the body you have now is not the body you had at 35. One of the biggest mistakes people make in later life is assuming that a history of getting away with something proves the risk is imaginary. It does not. It only means you were lucky, and luck is not a food safety system. The bacteria do not care about your track record. They care about the temperature, the clock, and the hours of quiet multiplication that happened while everyone was talking. And just when you think every surface is covered, here is the next layer of the problem. The next mistake is even more dangerous because it can happen before the eggs ever reach the plate. In fact, it can happen while the eggs are still raw, invisible, silent, spreading. It happens in kitchens that look spotless. It happens in the homes of people who would never dream of serving unsafe food. And most of them never know it happened until someone they love is sick. Here is number 3. Number 3, cross-contaminating your kitchen without realizing it. This mistake is almost invisible. You crack 2 eggs into a bowl. A little egg drips onto your fingers. You wipe your hands on the kitchen towel. Then you reach for the toast. Then the refrigerator handle. Then the coffee mug. Then the fruit bowl. Then maybe your phone. Nothing looks dirty. Nothing smells wrong. Nothing alerts you. But germs do not need to announce themselves to spread. They ride on fingers, on towels, on handles, and on the tiny droplets you never even noticed. This is how ordinary kitchens become contaminated in ways people never see. A cutting board gets used for one thing, then another, with no rinse in between. A spoon touches raw egg, then touches something else. A dish towel gets reused again and again, until it is basically a sponge for everything it has wiped up. A countertop gets wiped, but wiping is not cleaning, and the difference between those two words matters enormously. The routine is fast and familiar, so people move on without a second thought, carrying an invisible trail to the next object, the next surface, the next meal. And here is what makes this mistake so common. It is not the careless cooks who fall into it most often. It is experienced ones. People who have cooked for decades and can do it with their eyes closed, not because they are careless, but because they are comfortable. And comfort leads to autopilot. When hands move on their own, the mind checks out. And that is exactly when a tiny drop of raw egg begins a journey from the bowl to the towel to the handle to the fruit to the mouth of someone who never saw it coming. If you are over 60, this matters more than you realize. The issue is not just whether the egg gets fully cooked. The issue is what happens before the cooking finishes its job. Heat kills bacteria, but heat only protects the food in the pan. It cannot protect the door handle you touched an hour earlier, the towel you dried your hands on, or the apple you ate that afternoon. If raw egg contact your hands, the sink, the counter, a utensil, or another ready-to-eat food, the risk multiplies quietly and completely unnoticed. The egg gets safely cooked. The danger simply moves somewhere else before the pan ever got hot. And this mistake does not only harm you, it reaches everyone who eats in your home. Grandchildren whose immune systems are still developing, a spouse managing a chronic condition, a friend who is older or frilier than they let on. One careless moment in your kitchen can become a sick child on a school night or a frightened call to a physician about a loved one. The consequences are never contained to the person who cooked the meal. They spread exactly the way the germs do, silently, to everyone at the table. The safer routine is simple. After handling raw eggs, wash your hands with soap and water before touching anything else. Clean every utensil surface and bowl that contact a raw egg. Do not use the same cutting board or the same towel across multiple foods without cleaning in between. Consider a dedicated towel for hands and a separate one for dishes. And slow down just enough to notice when your routine has slipped into autopilot, because that is the exact moment the trail begins. Food safety is rarely ruined by a lack of intelligence. It is ruined by momentum. One rushed motion becomes another. One, "I will clean that in a second," becomes 3 more touches. One tiny shortcut becomes a contaminated breakfast. But here is the part that makes this whole conversation uncomfortable. Even a spotless kitchen, even hands washed and surfaces scrubbed, is still not enough to keep you completely safe. Because the next mistake can happen right on the plate, in front of you, with food that looks absolutely beautiful. At your favorite restaurant, at a family brunch, at your own table. And most people believe it is simply a matter of personal taste. In reality, it is a matter of risk. And the stakes just got higher than almost anyone realizes. Number 2, eating eggs that are too runny, too soft, or only partially cooked. If you love a glossy yolk, a jammy center, or softly scrambled eggs, you are not alone. A lot of people love eggs that way. They look beautiful on the plate. They taste rich. On restaurant menus and social media, undercooked eggs are regularly presented as the ideal. But when the conversation turns to adults over 60, something changes. Because what feels gourmet is not always what is safest. The food safety guidance is blunt. Eggs should be cooked until both the white and the yolk are firm. Scrambled eggs should not be runny. There is a reason for that rule, and it is not about ruining anyone's breakfast. Even eggs with clean, uncracked shells can carry salmonella. And while a younger person might experience a shorter, milder illness, older adults more often face severe symptoms and complications. Public health agencies explicitly list adults 65 and older among the groups at highest risk from foodborne germs like salmonella. A younger body may fight off the bacteria in a day or two. An older body may face dehydration, hospitalization, or far worse.